Tom Weller woke with the sun, as he always did, lacing his boots with military precision before stepping onto his porch. The cul-de-sac shimmered with a manicured calm, lawns clipped to uniform perfection, flags unfurled at measured heights, paint tones approved 6 ways to Sunday. He breathed in the order like it was holy. After 22 years in the Army, protocol wasn't a habit, it was identity. Now retired and serving as the head officer for the Willow Ridge HO, Tom carried a clipboard like it was a rifle, defending the peace of suburban heaven from the creeping disorder of civilian life. That morning, however, something disrupted his routine. It was the property at the end of Crofton Lane, the old brownstone with its peeling shutters and wisteria choking the fence posts. A new car was parked in the driveway, unregistered, unfamiliar. He squinted at the license plate, made a note, and started down the sidewalk. The woman had moved in 3 weeks prior. No welcome party, no small talk. She kept to herself, didn't attend community meetings, and waved only when necessary. Her name, according to HOA records, was Eva Thorne. Single. Paid the deposit in cash. Lawn was overgrown by a 1/4 inch. He'd tried friendliness once. She met his handshake with a pause before accepting it, gripped like someone who knew how to fight but chose not to. Her voice was low and clear, her eyes unreadable. "Thanks for checking in," she had said. "I prefer solitude." Tom didn't trust solitude. It bred secrets. By the 4th week, things escalated. Night after night, cars arrived at Eva's home, dark sedans, motorcycles, trucks with no decals. Men emerged, quiet, purposeful. They walked like they were on a mission, moved with the alert posture of people used to dangerous places. They didn't speak much. They disappeared before dawn. Tom watched from his window. He started logging details, license plates, time stamps, facial features. He positioned a new Ring camera to cover the far end of the street. Something wasn't right. When the 3rd complaint arrived, loud noises at midnight, sounds like equipment being moved, Tom knew it was time. Not for law enforcement. Not yet. First, protocol. A formal written notice. He stood at her door that Friday, the clipboard steady in his hand. The sun had dipped just beyond the roofs, casting the whole block in a soft orange haze. He rang the bell and waited, hearing the dull thud of movement inside. The door opened. She wore faded jeans, a loose black shirt, and gloves stained with oil. Her hair was tied back. Behind her, the faint smell of metal and sweat hung in the air. He could see weights on the floor, duffel bags stacked neatly, mats rolled against the wall. "Evening, Miss Thorne." "Tom Weller, HOA Enforcement," he said, voice steady. "You've received 2 notices already. This will be your 3rd and final warning." She didn't take the paper from him. And the violation? Unpermitted visitors. Late-hour disturbances. Improper lawn maintenance. Possibly unregistered firearms, based on observed cases being unloaded. She raised an eyebrow, the corner of her mouth twitching slightly. Not a smile, something colder. "Anything dangerous, officer?" "I'm not a cop anymore," Tom said. "But I know what tactical gear looks like. This is a neighborhood. We have families here." She leaned against the doorframe. "You're not wrong. There are families. Which is why I'm careful." Tom bristled. Careful would mean following regulations. And regulations are your compass. He felt the sting beneath her words, subtle but aimed. He shifted his stance. "Miss Thorne, if this continues, I'll be forced to escalate the matter to legal action. You understand?" For the first time, her expression softened, but not out of fear. There was something like pity in her eyes, and it unsettled him more than anger would have. "I understand," she said. "But be careful what you escalate, Mr. Weller. Not everything dangerous comes in loud packages." The door closed gently. Tom walked back home slower than usual, unsettled. He spent the next day reviewing footage. Nothing criminal, nothing obvious. But his instincts roared. He'd lost friends to shadows, men like him blown apart because someone missed the signs. By Sunday night, another car appeared. This time, a heavy-set man with a limp stepped out, carrying a case that clanked with metal. Tom watched from behind his blinds, heart racing. He picked up the phone, hovered over the number for local law enforcement, then put it down again. His thumb tapped against his thigh. He needed more. Monday morning, he printed images, built a timeline, cross-checked with the HOA bylaws. He drafted a full report, stapled neatly, and placed it in the file marked, pending investigation. But as he flipped the folder shut, something tugged at him, just a flicker, deep in the part of his gut he rarely questioned. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. He'd seen that look before, the men arriving at Eva's house, the way they carried their silence. It reminded him of the soldiers who returned from war and never spoke again. Ghosts in real skin. Still, rules were rules. He folded the report and slid it into his briefcase. That evening, Tom drove around the block again. This time he didn't stop at her door. He just watched from the shadows. Lights flickered in the garage. For a moment, the door opened wide, revealing 3 men inside in silence. One running drills with weighted ropes, another assembling what looked like a disassembled communications rig, the third writing notes on a whiteboard. In the corner stood Eva, arms crossed, eyes sharp, mouth set in quiet instruction. Not a host. Not a neighbor. Something else entirely. Tom drove home, left the report on the kitchen table, and stared at it for a long time. The edges curled slightly under the ceiling fan breeze. He didn't sleep well that night. And by morning, the urge to uncover what she truly was burned stronger than the need to follow protocol. Tom returned on foot, clipboard tucked under his arm more out of ritual than necessity. The morning air was damp, and the sky bruised with the promise of rain. He walked the path like a soldier on a mission, eyes forward, pace firm, doubts packed away beneath discipline. This wasn't about neighborly conduct anymore. This was about something deeper. Something that scratched against every instinct he had left. He didn't knock this time. Just stood at the threshold, jaw tight, and waited until she appeared in the doorway again. No surprise on her face, no annoyance either. It was as though she'd been expecting him all along. "You're persistent," she said. "You're evasive," he replied. A long moment passed. Her hand drifted toward the doorframe but didn't close it. "You should come in." He hesitated. "Unless you'd rather watch from the bushes again," she added without heat. Tom stepped inside. The air smelled of oil and sweat and faintly of antiseptic. The lights were dim. The open layout gave way to a converted interior, carpet stripped, foam mats laid down, a corner filled with weights and sandbags. There were no photos on the walls, no family heirlooms. Just function. Purpose. Discipline. He saw a man in the back room cleaning a rifle, barrel detached, no magazine in sight. Another sat cross-legged, meditating with his eyes closed, dog tags resting on his chest. "I suppose you're not going to pretend anymore," Tom said. Eva walked past him, calm and measured. "Pretending wastes energy." "What is this place?" "A recovery zone. A training site. A refuge." "For who?" She paused by a steel cabinet, opened it slowly, and pulled out a file. "For those who have nowhere else to go. Soldiers who don't fit into polite society anymore." Tom watched her carefully. "That sounds like a militia." "It isn't." "You expect me to take your word for it?" "No," she said. "I expect you to read." She handed him the file. Inside were photographs of men in uniforms, their faces younger, sharper, but unmistakably the same ones he'd seen coming and going. Beneath each image was a military designation: Navy SEAL, Delta Force, Green Beret. Some of the names he recognized. Medals. Service records. Citations for bravery. And then letters. From psychiatrists. From military chaplains. From government liaisons. All detailing cases of men discarded after service, PTSD, dishonorable discharges for conduct born of trauma, families that abandoned them, VA systems that failed. "These are your guests?" Tom asked. "They're not guests. They're my students." He looked up. "You're training them for what?" "To remember who they were before the silence swallowed them." There was no performance in her voice. No rhetoric. Just fact, delivered like a soldier giving coordinates. Still, Tom's doubt didn't fade. "You served?" She nodded once. 18 years. Joint Task Force. Most of it off the record. I specialized in behavioral destabilization and resistance ops. When I left, I didn't want to teach anymore. But they kept showing up. And this is how you help them? Rebuilding from muscle memory. Breaking down their fear. Giving them a place where their instincts aren't wrong. Tom lowered the file, heart thudding. But this is a civilian neighborhood. You're not above the law. You're not above regulation. I never claimed to be. They don't belong here, he muttered, not entirely convinced. Eva walked closer. Tell me, Mr. Weller, if a house was on fire, and one of these men ran into it to save a child, would you still file a complaint because he didn't wear HOA-approved reflective gear? His mouth opened, but no answer came. His instincts, his training, should have supplied one. But all he could summon was silence. They're not threats, she continued. But they're not safe either. They've been wired to survive. You know what that does to someone. Tom flinched. She was right. He did know. He saw it in the mirror some mornings, eyes that still scanned corners, ears that caught noises others missed, a body that tensed at slamming doors. You're one of them, he said quietly. Not anymore, she replied. Now I teach them how to unlearn the worst of it. So maybe they don't become headlines. Or ghosts. He sat down, more from the weight of it all than fatigue. The room suddenly felt different. Less like a hidden bunker, more like a lifeboat floating in an indifferent world. But why here? He asked. Because a quiet street with white fences and barbecues is exactly where they're told they don't belong. And that's exactly where they need to be. Tom stared at the men, still silent, still focused. Not a word had passed between them and him. Yet he sensed no threat. Only gravity. He stood again. You still broke protocol. I did, she said. I can report this. Shut this down. You can, she agreed. But you won't. He blinked. Why? Because you're tired of losing things you care about. And I think you care about this neighborhood more than you realize. Tom turned toward the door. You think you've read me? No, Eva said. I recognize you. There's a difference. He stepped outside into the drizzle, gripping the file as if it held more than paper. The street looked the same, still lawns, trimmed hedges, kids' bikes leaning against mailboxes. But something in him had shifted. The rigid lines of right and wrong blurred, not into moral fog, but into something more complicated. More human. That night he placed the file in his desk drawer and left it there. Unreported. But he didn't stop watching. Not because he feared what she might do, but because, for the first time, he wanted to understand what she already had. The storm arrived without warning, sheets of rain slamming rooftops, wind howling like something feral. Power flickered along Crofton Lane, porch lights blinked out one by one, and stillness settled over Willow Ridge like the long breath before a scream. Tom Weller stood at his window again, staring out into the night. The streets were empty, but his gut churned. Something was wrong. Not the kind of wrong that came with downed trees or soaked basements, but the kind that crawled up the spine and whispered of blood. At precisely 2:14 a.m., the first explosion shattered the silence. The blast came from the far end of the block, 2 houses down from Eva's. A fireball rolled into the sky, painting the rain orange. Windows burst, alarms shrieked. Tom's body moved before thought kicked in. He grabbed his boots, his flashlight, and the sidearm he hadn't touched in years. The muscle memory roared back. He hit the street at a sprint, rain slicing across his face. Sirens blared in the distance, still too far. Smoke curled toward the clouds. One house had collapsed in on itself, and another had been sprayed with shrapnel. But Tom's eyes were fixed on the shadows moving through the chaos. 3 figures in dark clothing, moving with uncanny precision, slipping between homes with silencers raised. Professionals. He dove behind a neighbor's hedge, heart pounding. The figures weren't looters. They weren't vandals. This was a strike. And Eva's house was their destination. Tom bolted toward her yard, ducking behind her truck as 2 of the intruders neared the back entrance. He saw the lead attacker plant a breaching charge against the doorframe, then raise his weapon. The blast kicked the door inward, but before they could enter, Eva was already moving. She exploded from the garage like a ghost in motion, Low, fast, brutal. The first man barely had time to turn before she was on him. Her elbow shattered his nose, her knee caught his throat, and the weapon hit the pavement with a wet clatter. The second raised his pistol, too slow. Eva twisted low and kicked his legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard. She drove her boot into his ribs until he stopped moving. The third attacker fired from the corner of the yard, bullets ripping through the air. Tom ducked, mud splashing against his knees. Eva rolled behind a tree trunk, her face expressionless. Tom recognized that look, the look of someone who had already calculated every possible outcome. He rose from cover and fired twice, missing narrowly but forcing the shooter to retreat toward the fence. Eva was on him in seconds, disarming him mid-motion. Her knife flashed once. The man collapsed. And then silence. Smoke drifted lazily in the rain. Tom stood up slowly, ears ringing. He watched Eva as she exhaled and wiped the blood from her face with the back of her hand. One of her students, Reed, the man with the limp, staggered out of the house, a shotgun in hand, scanning the scene. His eyes met Eva's. A single nod passed between them. Tom approached cautiously, gun lowered. What the hell was that? Eva knelt beside one of the unconscious men, pulling a phone from his pocket. A test. He blinked. A test. They've been watching us, she said, scrolling through the phone, eyes narrowing. They wanted to see how fast we'd respond. How hard we'd hit back. Who are they? She hesitated, then handed him the phone. On the screen was a map, marked points along the East Coast, each tagged with addresses, names. Tom saw military bases. Rehabilitation centers. One was a homeless shelter for veterans in Virginia. They're targeting former operatives, Eva said. The kind no one will notice if they vanish. Tom's stomach turned. Why? Because someone out there wants to erase them. Wipe the slate clean of anyone trained, wounded, or left behind. They think we're liabilities. And they came here to start. Eva nodded. We've intercepted rumors, but this confirms it. Willow Ridge was supposed to be safe. Neutral. But they tracked us. Tom ran a hand over his soaked hair, mind racing. The neighborhood had no idea what had just happened. No one understood that 3 men had walked into their cul-de-sac prepared to murder. And only one house had stood in the way. You should call the police, he muttered. They won't come fast enough. And even if they did, these men don't have identities that trace. You know how these things vanish into paperwork. He did. Too many classified files, too many convenient blanks. Tom looked around, at the mangled door, the blood pooling in the grass, the rain starting to wash it all away. You saved them, he said quietly. This neighborhood. Eva looked at him, her face unreadable. I did what needed doing. He studied her in the flickering porch light. There was no triumph in her expression. No righteousness. Only exhaustion and readiness for the next blow. A distant siren wailed. Closer now. We can't stay, she added. Not here. Tom's chest tightened. They'll come back. Yes, she said. And they won't just want me next time. They'll want anyone who helped. He looked down at the unconscious bodies, then toward his own home, quiet, dark, untouched. You should run, she added. You've got enough plausible deniability. But he didn't move. Instead, he crouched and pulled one of the attacker's radios from his vest. Tuned the frequency. Static. Then, a voice. Unit 3, respond. Status report. Tom clicked the button. Hesitated. Then replied, mimicking the attacker's tone. Unit 3 secure. Target neutralized. The pause. Then, proceed to next target. Tom switched off the radio and stood. Eva raised an eyebrow. You just told them what they wanted to hear. I bought us time, he said. And now we know where they're headed next. She studied him for a moment. Then, for the first time, she smiled, small and solemn. You're not just an enforcer after all. I was never just that, he said. He turned back toward the flashing lights coming down the street. But we can't stay reactive. You said it yourself, someone out there is hunting ghosts. Eva nodded. Then maybe it's time we gave them a few new ones to be afraid of. Tom looked up at the sky, at the storm breaking into quiet. The neighborhood would wake soon, half aware, shaken but safe. They'd see the damage, hear the explanations, and go back to their routines. But something had changed. Not just in the soil or the air. In him. He wasn't defending a list of rules anymore. He was defending something real. And this time, he wouldn't wait behind the blinds.